Do we have representative democracy in the USA? Our system of government is called a constitutional republic, and our elected officials are supposed to represent we, the people. But do they? If they did, we would reasonably expect, for example, that if 50% of the voting public supported a proposal, 50% of the politicians would too. And if 100% of the voting public supported something, then 100% of their representatives would too. As we'll see, this ideal correlation is not reality in America, or at least it has not been for decades. This chart represents how it really is, and how it has been for many decades. We'll explain it all in this video. Stay tuned. Once upon a time in the USA, there was something called a democracy. Not anymore. The richest 10% of America has far more power than the other 90%. Also, it is now possible for foreign powers to more or less buy elections, anonymously, secretly, and legally. The American people have the least power in all of this. What happened? A series of steps down a slippery slope, arguably starting with the spoils system, also known as the patronage system of the 1830s, and continuing down the slope with other things, including, but not limited to, the first PACs, that is, Political Action Committees, formed in 1944, Buckley versus Vallejo, 1976, First National Bank of Boston versus Bellotti, 1978, and Citizens United versus the FEC, 2010, which was a step off the cliff, has led to our current situation. A government of the rich, for the rich, and by the rich. Big political elections are puppet shows. Candidates of both major parties are puppets. The Senate, the House of Representatives, the President, the Vice President, all puppets of big money and big corporations, Wall Street, and the super rich. Between 2010 and 2015, the top 200 most political companies invested $5.9 billion legally bribing the government, and in return the government gave them $4.4 trillion taken from we, the people, taxpayers. That's just the top 20 companies, and that's just in a 5-year period alone. And that's just one example of one way in which the system is corrupt. We, the people, have almost no impact. Big money has almost total control. Voters don't decide who gets elected. Voters only have the illusion of choice, a choice between puppets controlled by the same puppet master. According to the nation's premier political money tracking research groups, the Center for Responsive Politics, a non-profit, non-partisan organization, money wins elections at least 90% of the time. That is, whichever candidate has the most money spent on their campaign will win 9 out of 10 times or more. It's not the issues, it's not their platforms, it's the money. They found that 93% of the time, money wins elections for the House of Representatives. For the Senate, it's 94% of the time. It does not actually make a difference which puppet gets elected because virtually all of the time the puppets do what big money makes them do, and virtually none of the time the puppets do what we, the people, want them to do. The White House, Congress, all puppets to big money. So what the hell happened? As mentioned, there has been a number of steps leading to our current situation. Let's go a little deeper into some of this stuff, starting with the Powell Memo of August 23, 1971. Lewis Powell, a corporate lawyer on the board of 11 corporations, wrote a secret memo to his friend, the director of the Chamber of Commerce. It was later leaked by reporter Jack Anderson. The memo said that they should seek to challenge the campaign finance laws before the Supreme Court at the time. 2 months later, President Nixon appointed him to the Supreme Court, where his was the deciding vote in Buckley versus Vallejo, 1976. In Buckley versus Vallejo, the Supreme Court ruled that there could be no expenditure limits in election campaigns because that violates the corporation's First Amendment rights. Yes, corporations have had rights, First Amendment rights, for years now. Contribution limits remained in place as well as disclosure laws, meaning that the public still had free access to who bought who. In First National Bank of Boston versus Bellotti, 1978, it was held that corporations have First Amendment rights to free speech in the form of contributions to ballot initiative campaigns, and any state law limiting this was violating the corporation's First Amendment rights, and was therefore overturned. We'll cover this last step, Citizens United versus the FEC 2010, shortly. But for now, let's look at the famous study from Princeton University released in 2014 called Testing Theories of American Politics, Elites, Interest Groups, and Average Citizens. In this paper, Professor Martin Gillens and Benjamin L. Page analyzed 1,779 different policy initiatives or issues between 1981 and 2002, and concluded that virtually all of the decisions were made in favor of the rich and against America and the American people. They write that the average citizen and even, quote, mass-based interest groups, unquote, have virtually no influence on the decision politicians make in office. They looked at the average U.S. citizen in comparison to the top 10%. They wrote, quote, multivariate analysis indicates that economic elites and organized groups representing business interests have substantial independent impacts on U.S. government policy, while average citizens and mass-based interest groups have little or no independent influence. They also wrote, quote, when a major citizen disagrees with economic elites and or with organized interests, they generally lose. Moreover, because of the strong status quo bias built into the U.S. political system, even when fairly large majorities of Americans favor policy change, they generally do not get it, unquote. They wrote, quote, America's claims to being a democratic society are seriously threatened. In the United States, our findings indicate the majority does not rule. The average American appears to have only a minuscule, near-zero, statistically non-significant impact upon public policy, unquote. They say that the average American has the, quote, least effect, unquote, on decisions politicians make, and, quote, the net alignments of the most influential business-oriented groups are negatively related to the average citizen's wishes. So existing interest groups do not serve effectively as transmission belts for the wishes of the populace, unquote. They also wrote, quote, this does not mean that ordinary citizens always lose out. They fairly often get the policies they favor, but only because those policies happen to also be preferred by the economically elite citizens who wield the actual influence. This was called the Duh report in the media in both the US and the UK. Duh. It is important to keep in mind that this report does not include changes made since 2002, such as the 2010 case of Citizens United versus FEC, the Federal Elections Commission, in which the Supreme Court ruled 5-4 that corporations are people with the right to free speech in the form of money, and that money, or speech, can be unlimited and secret. Even foreign powers can now secretly buy candidates and win elections. Keep in mind that corporations cannot get arrested like people, do not die like people, were never born, cannot be jailed like people, do not have a conscience, and do not have a heart. In fact, by law, a corporation is bound to do everything it can to make the most money by any and all means. Let's be real. Corporations are not people, and money is not speech. What this decision did is make it harder than ever, virtually impossible, for any smaller party to have a chance. As Green Party's co-chair Sandra Everett said, quote, the ruling especially hurts the ability of parties that don't accept corporate contributions like the Green Party to compete, unquote. As Ralph Nader puts it, quote, with this decision, corporations can now directly pour vast amounts of corporate money, though independent expenditure, into the electoral swamp already flooded with corporate campaign PAC contribution dollars. Pat Choate, former vice president of the Reform Party, said, quote, the court has in effect legalized foreign governments and foreign corporations to participate in our electoral politics, unquote. Fred Wertheimer, a campaign finance reformer, wrote, quote, Exxon or any other firm can spend Bloomberg-level sums in any congressional district in the country against, say, any congressman who supports climate change legislation or healthcare, etc., unquote. In a New York Times editorial, 2010, David Kirkpatrick said, quote, the Supreme Court has handed lobbyists a new weapon. A lobbyist can now tell any elected official, if you vote wrong, my company, labor union, or interest group will spend unlimited sums explicitly advertising against your re-election, unquote. It is no wonder why this has been called, quote, the most serious threat to American democracy in a generation, unquote. Later in 2010, the Disclose Act, which is Democracy is Strengthened by Casting a Light on Spending in Elections Act, was a bill brought before Congress that would have prohibited foreign powers from buying U.S. elections and make it so that large donations, over $10,000, would be disclosed so that the voting public can know which politicians are owned by which corporations, 501(c)s, and etc. Congress voted it down. No. Both Republicans and Democrats voted against this bill. Both parties did. A different version of the same bill, called Disclose Act 2 by some, was brought before Congress in July of 2012. Once again, both Democrats and Republicans said no. In so doing, they have almost totally killed the last shred of democracy in our electoral system. Now politicians can be bought in total secret by foreign money, so you have no idea who you are actually voting for. You cast votes for puppets without knowing who the puppet master is. That is not democracy. Democracy is laying there wounded, in critical condition. Does all this mean there is no chance to save our democracy? Can the spirit of liberty reawaken our democracy? Yes, I would argue. Of course it can. The sleeping giant need only awaken, and there's something about America and the American spirit when the sleeping giant does awaken. Look out. We will rise up, shake off our chains with ease, and smash our oppressors. The sleeping giant need only awaken. So yes, there is hope. A number of possible solutions are discussed in part 2. See the link in the description to this video to see that video. Thank you for watching this video. Please like this video and please subscribe to this channel, and please consider donating to us. It takes a lot of time and research to come up with this stuff, so please donate. Thank you.
Hold on. How many MCs must get this?